Hello Singapore, my name is Amy Franceschini from Futurefarmers in San Francisco. I'm sorry I can't be there today, and I want to thank Design Indaba for giving us the opportunity to think about farming in the future. We decided not to come to Singapore because we wanted to use our carbon footprint that we would have used to get there here in San Francisco to invite thinkers and have a parallel session, which you saw portions of yesterday. I would also like to thank Nadine for your amazing coordination with everybody in Singapore and getting all of this together and starting a conversation about Victory Gardens. What I'd like to do is show you a little bit about what happened here in San Francisco during Victory Gardens and what's happening now. So I'd like to start with the project Victory Gardens that I started in 2007. And as you saw in the last parallel session, we showed some of these images of a space colony that was imagined in 1975. And I like to think about these as projections of what life might be outside of this planet, and to look at how interesting it is that actually it's not much different. We don't imagine much differently what it might be like in a space colony. That we actually want to preserve what we currently live in. Like, this doesn't look much different than a Mediterranean subdivision or bedroom community. In fact, if you know the San Francisco Bay Area, this looks a lot like Palo Alto. So this just made me question, what is it, why are we projecting these futures that look so much like our present day when we could just preserve what is currently on this planet? Here's another picture, which even included hippie communes up in the mountaintops, which actually existed during 1975 when these were designed. So some of the work that Futurefarmers have done is thinking about how do we use the resources that we have currently on the planet to sustain ourselves. This was a lunchbox laboratory, much like a space station in a way, where we were trying to grow power and energy in small test tubes in the form of hydrogen. So algae would be put into certain conditions and it would produce hydrogen. And after this project, we thought about, why are we trying to sustain life in test tubes? Why don't we try to do this on an everyday life in an everyday manner? So I started looking back at when Americans or humans were farming and growing in cities. And I found during the World War II, during the bombing in England, a family filled in a hole with a garden. And I thought about how it's sort of human nature to sustain life for ourselves, right? If you don't have food, you're going to figure out a way to get it. And I thought this was just a very beautiful, poetic, and horrific image of a husband and wife growing a farm in a bombed-out shell in London. I found this image in San Francisco of a garden in front of our city hall. This was in 1942 during the Victory Garden program in San Francisco and in America, which was basically a national program to build national morale, but also to have people grow food in their backyards and every open space in public space and in cities possible. A guide was sent out by the government to teach cities how to start a Victory Garden program. And this guide today holds true. It's basically 12 pages of how to start a Victory Garden program. Within 2 years of distributing this guide, 20 million people were farming in America. And that is really exciting to me to think about. Within 2 years of starting something, 20 million people participating. I don't think I know of anything that grand except for maybe shopping or sports events that Americans do on that grand of a scale. So just to show you, in 1943, 2 years later, 20 million gardens were producing 8 million tons of food, which was basically 48% of our total food grown in backyards and open lots in America. Every park in America was urged to have gardens. This was Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. There were 800 plots made available to citizens and people of San Francisco. This is sort of the progress over 2 years. After school programs were urged, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts became Victory Gardeners. A huge amount of propaganda was sent out. I'll just run through some of it. This one's especially scary. It says, "All Americans urged to grow victory gardens. You can make this kind of ammunition." Tool sheds and seed libraries were set up in every city, and churches were urged to open spaces to run these so that people could have easy access to these tools and resources. Churches were also opening their kitchens to can food and teach how to can food. So after seeing all of this, there's definitely a momentum that's exciting to latch onto. I mean, the implications of the nationalism that was implied in that program are problematic. But if we think about how do we harness that same energy in a current time of war, what it could possibly mean today, and how we could use the name Victory Gardens to actually critique the notion of victory and redefine that meaning to mean something else besides the term victory that we all are too familiar with. So I started to look at how much space there was in San Francisco in the backyards, and I urged the city with a presentation to make it easier for citizens and people of San Francisco to garden their backyards. And I found that the total backyard space in San Francisco is 1,822 acres, which is quite a large farm if you think about it. So I too decided to make my own propaganda. And instead of making completely printed matter, I decided to make sculptural elements that were invitations to take part in this program that I was proposing to the city. So this is a pogo stick shovel. This is a bike barrow that I proposed that we would use to deliver soil and wheelbarrows to citizens and people. I'm sorry I'm using that word citizen. This is a bicycle trike and a gardener that we hired to do a pilot program to deliver 15 gardens to citizens. This was a proposal for a seed library that the city would keep to preserve bioregional seeds and flora. And this was a starter kit that we designed to distribute to people involved in the program. So we ran a pilot program where we planted 15 gardens, and the city gave us a year of funding. We would make a poster for every planting specific to the household that we were planting for and plaster the neighborhood with invitations for the neighbors to come. We would ask each grower to sign a good gardening oath where they would have to farm for 5 years in their backyard and save their seeds and call us if anything ever went wrong. So we were available through a 1-800 number to come and problem solve. So I wanted to show you this first garden that we gardened, and mainly because it's a good example of land use in San Francisco. So you see on the left, this is one huge garden that the owners have done nothing with. It's virtually a sand dune, which was previously what this area was. On the right, this man has decided to cover his whole garden, his backyard, in cement. We chose the middle space because we put a call on Craigslist to give away these gardens, and this was a family of 10 Chinese Americans living in one household who had 3 children, and they needed to feed their children, and food was getting quite expensive, so they wanted to offset the cost by growing their own food. So this is the garden we chose. Basically, the perimeter is lined by earth, and we took all of the weeds out and delivered 2 boxes with starters. And basically, we delivered these 2 boxes with starters, and then they opened up their whole backyard and planted in the surrounding areas, which was our hope for the program, that by this small gift of a starter kit, that the owners of the house would expand upon that. So a year later, we came back, and they had built another raised bed, a greenhouse, and were saving their seeds and regrowing them. Here's some pictures of that. And this is the garden currently. So they're sort of our star child of the Victory Garden program. They have 2 greenhouses now. They have a rainwater harvesting system on their roof. These compost bins in the back are made from recycled levolure blinds that are woven together. So this family kind of took it to the next level and actually saved seeds, and we used some of their seeds in the next project, which I'm going to show you. And I just want to show you this note that family gave us one day when we went by. They don't speak any English, so they communicate through their grandchildren and these beautiful notes. So our next project was, if the city is supporting this program through their funding, then they should demonstrate that support in the front of their civic center. So we convinced the city hall to plant a temporary garden in the main square of the city to represent their support for urban agriculture. This program was paramount because all of these circles that you see represent all the different gardening groups in San Francisco. So because they all came together, it really galvanized that community through working in this one central space. So here's on planting day. Here's the media. There's our mayor planting the significant lettuce patch. And this is at the height of the season. That garden gained international and national press, which really moved the urban agriculture movement forward here in San Francisco. And you could say that it quite possibly influenced Michelle Obama to have a garden at the White House. So where does this leave us? At this point, I think the question we need to answer is, how do we simultaneously grow in cities and sustain ourselves? I'm going to pose a few questions, and hopefully you'll be able to discuss them there. What does it mean to have common space in a city? What is a common space? What is a park? What is a school? These are questions that we're asking ourselves in San Francisco, and currently we're trying to redefine what a park is. If a park is to be a recreational space, is food part of that equation? So I'd like to end by saying, I think we have a lot to think about and a lot to do, but there's a lot of you in the audience, there's a lot of this on this round planet, and if we put our minds to it, we're going to be eating really good food for the rest of our lives.